They say some houses are born bad, others are made bad by the things that happen inside them, and then there are the ones that wait, patient, starving, listening. My name is Elias Marrow. Up until 3 months ago, I was a sound engineer for a true crime podcast network in Seattle. I spent my days cleaning up confessions, making murderers sound intimate in your earbuds. I was good at it, too good. I could make a man describing how he skinned his wife alive feel like he was whispering a bedtime story. Maybe that's why the house chose me. It started with a single email. Subject line: "We found something in your childhood home." The sender was an estate lawyer I'd never heard of. My parents died when I was 9, car crash on an icy road outside Duvall, Washington. After the funeral, I was shipped off to my aunt in Portland. The house on Liebrook Road was sold before I even understood what foreclosure meant. I hadn't thought about it in 23 years. The email said the new owners had defaulted. The bank seized it. During the eviction, workers discovered a locked room behind a false wall in the basement. Inside, reel-to-reel tapes, hundreds of them, labeled with dates going back to 1974, and every single one had my childhood handwriting on the spine. Dates I would have been 4, 5, 6 years old. Dates before my parents ever bought the place. I told myself it was a prank, someone screwing with the true crime guy. I almost deleted it, but the last line of the email broke me. "The tapes have your voice on them, Mr. Marrow, a child's voice, and whatever you're saying, it isn't English." I drove up the next morning. Liebrook Road hasn't changed. Black pines crowd the asphalt like mourners. The river runs parallel 100 yards to the left, low and brown, smelling of rust even in summer. Mailboxes rot on their posts. The only difference now is that every house except one has been torn down for a failed luxury vineyard that never broke ground, just empty gravel pads and survey stakes. And then, at the dead end behind a chain that wasn't there when I was a kid, number 19, my house. It looked smaller than memory, the way childhood things do, but wrong in every other way. The blue paint my mother loved had gone the color of drowned skin. Every window was boarded from the inside, not the outside, as if the house itself had pulled the plywood over its own eyes. The front door hung open 2 inches. Not forced, just inviting. I brought 3 things: a Zoom H6 recorder, habit, a mag light with fresh batteries, and the Glock 19 I bought after a stalker sent me a box of teeth that turned out to belong to one of my podcast guests. I told no one where I was going. The moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped 15 degrees. My breath plumed. The smell hit me like a fist, wet plaster, old blood, and something sweet underneath, like rotting honeysuckle. The foyer floorboards were coated in a fine gray dust that showed no footprints, not even mine as I walked. The dust simply closed behind me, seamless. I called out, because that's what people do in horror stories, and apparently in real life too. "Hello?" My voice came back wrong. Not an echo, an answer. A child's voice, thin and cracked from somewhere deep in the walls. "Elias." I laughed. I actually laughed because the alternative was screaming. I told myself it was a prank, motion-activated speakers, some sick YouTuber trying to go viral off my childhood trauma. I clicked on the recorder. Timestamp, October 14th, 11:07 a.m. I swept the living room first. The furniture was gone, but the outlines remained, darker rectangles on the hardwood where sunlight had never touched. Someone had taken a knife and carved long, shallow grooves in the floor in perfect concentric circles, hundreds of them, like ripples frozen in wood. In the kitchen, every cabinet door hung open. Inside each one, a single Polaroid. Same subject, a little boy with dark hair and hollow eyes standing in this exact kitchen, wearing pajamas I recognized. My pajamas, with tiny yellow submarines. But the photos were wrong. In some, the boy was missing an arm. In others, both eyes were black voids. One showed him with his mouth sewn shut with what looked like copper wire. On the back of every picture, written in red ballpoint pen, "He's still hungry." I gagged so hard I nearly vomited. That's when I heard the singing. It came from below, soft, harmonic, a choir of children, maybe 30 voices, perfectly in tune, but the language wasn't Latin or Hebrew or anything human. The syllables hurt to hear, like glass dragged on the inside of my skull. And underneath the melody, a low thrumming, the kind of sub-bass you feel in your teeth. I found the basement door in the hallway. It had never been there when I was a child. I would have remembered. The original basement access was a hatch under the stairs. This door was new or old, raw pine, no varnish, iron hinges black with age. A child's handprint in what looked like dried blood on the knob, my size, age 6, maybe 7. I should have left then. Instead, I opened the door. The singing got louder, closer, eager. The stairs descended into pure dark. My maglite barely cut 10 feet. The beam trembled because my hand was shaking. I counted 23 steps before I reached the bottom. The air down here was warmer, thick, like breathing inside someone's lungs. I swept the light. The basement had been finished once, cheap 1970s paneling, shag carpet gone black with mold. Now it was stripped to the studs. Every wall, every beam, every inch of concrete floor was covered in writing. Not graffiti, not madness, perfect copperplate handwriting, row after row, floor to ceiling. The same sentence over and over. We are the hollow choir, and we have your voice. My recorder picked up something the human ear almost missed, a second set of voices beneath the singing, whispering, my name, again and again, Elias, 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 like a heartbeat. In the far corner, behind a false wall that had been crudely torn open, fresh splinters still sharp, stood the tapes. Hundreds of them, Ampex 566 reels, museum pieces, stacked on metal shelves that went back into the dark farther than my light could reach. Each box labeled in my own handwriting, dates from 1974 to 1987. My birth year was 1988. I pulled the closest one. The label read, Elias, age 5, track 01, first feeding. My knees buckled. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours. Time felt like negotiable down there. Then the singing stopped. Dead silence. The kind of silence that has weight. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then died completely. New batteries, less than 30 minutes old. In the dark, something exhaled right behind my neck, warm, wet, smelling of soil and milk teeth.
A child's voice, no more than 6 inches from my ear, whispered in perfect English for the first time, "You came back to finish the song." I ran. I don't remember the stairs. I don't remember dropping the recorder or clawing the front door open. I only remember the daylight hitting me like a slap and the sound of every board in that house creaking at once as if it was standing up to watch me leave. I made it to my car, locked the doors, sat there hyperventilating until the windows fogged. That's when I noticed the passenger seat. A single reel-to-reel tape sat on it. No box, just the reel itself. Label in my handwriting, Elias, age 34, track 01, Homecoming. I never picked that tape up.
People think silence is the absence of sound. They're wrong. Silence is a presence. It watches. It waits. And sometimes it sings back. I left the motel at dawn. The sky was the color of a healing bruise. I drove west until the Cascades gave way to salt wind in the gray Pacific. I told myself distance would muffle it, that if I put enough miles between me and Liebrook Road, the song would lose my frequency. It didn't. The choir followed me like a stain. In a Safeway parking lot in Aberdeen, every car alarm went off at once, perfectly synchronized, pitching up and down in the exact melody I'd heard in the basement. Old men clutched their chests. Dogs howled until their throats bled. It lasted 47 seconds. Then nothing. Security footage later showed every vehicle rocking side to side, as if something huge and invisible was walking between the rows, pressing down on roofs with bare feet. I kept driving. By nightfall, I was in a rented cabin outside Forks, the kind of place that still advertises color TV like it's 1987. No neighbors for half a mile, no cell service, no Wi-Fi. Perfect isolation. I thought I could outrun a sound. I was an idiot. The first night in the cabin, I didn't sleep. I sat at the knotty pine table with my new Zoom H6, 4 shotgun mics pointed at the 4 cardinal directions, gain cranked so high the preamps hissed like snakes. I was waiting for it, recording nothing and everything. At 02:11 a.m., the temperature in the room dropped so fast that the glass of water beside me formed a skin of ice. The recorder's waveform, which had been flat for hours, suddenly spiked blood red. Not one channel, all 4, perfectly in phase. A child's voice, crystal clear, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Elias, you brought us with you." I played it back immediately. The voice was mine, age 6, the same timbre my mother recorded on a Fisher-Price cassette when I sang "You Are My Sunshine" at kindergarten graduation. Except I never recorded this sentence, and the cadence was wrong. Too calm, too knowing. I saved the file as evidence_001 and encrypted the drive. Then I did something I swore I wouldn't do. I played the reel I'd found on my passenger seat. I'd bought a refurbished Nagra 4S on the way, the kind of machine that costs more than most cars. The cabin had a wood stove. I fed it until the room glowed orange, as if heat could protect me. I threaded the tape. Label again, in my own adult handwriting that I did not write. Elias, age 34, track 01, Homecoming. Leader tape hissed, then the sound of a child crying. My crying, age maybe 4, the kind of raw, airless sobbing that comes after the worst nightmare, when you don't even have words yet, just animal grief. Adult me spoke over it, gentle, coaxing. "Shh, little ghost, it's okay. Open wide. That's it. Swallow the note." There was a wet, gulping sound. Then the crying stopped
instantly. Silence for 8 full seconds. Then 30 voices, children's voices, began to sing in perfect unison, my 6-year-old voice now the clearest among them. The melody was the same one from the basement, but slower now, almost sensual. Every syllable vibrated inside my bones like a tuning fork struck against a coffin lid. The track ended with a click. The Nagra's take-up reel kept spinning, though, empty tape flapping. Except it wasn't empty. I could see something moving on the clear leader tape, a dark smudge traveling the surface like an ant trapped under plastic, around and around, faster and faster, until the reel blurred. I hit stop. The smudge kept moving. I ripped the tape off the machine, spooling brown ribbon across the floor in frantic loops. The smudge was gone, but every loop of tape now had a perfect child-sized mouth printed on it, lips parted, no teeth, black inside like wells. I burned the whole reel in the wood stove. The flames were blue. The mouths opened wider and sang anyway, their voices coming out of the fire itself, joyful, grateful. I didn't sleep again for 4 days. On the 5th day, I drove into Port Angeles and checked myself into the emergency room because my left ear had started bleeding. Not a trickle, a steady pour, warm and syrupy, soaking through 3 towels before the nurse saw me. The ENT on call was a tired woman named Dr. Patel. She scoped my ear canal with a camera and went very, very quiet. I asked what she saw. She hesitated, then turned the monitor toward me. Inside my ear canal, past the curve you're never supposed to see without surgery, was a perfect tiny human mouth, no throat behind it, just lips, pale and bloodless, pressed against the canal wall like it was kissing the camera lens. It opened. It spoke with my childhood voice. "Tell the doctor we're almost ready for the next verse." Dr. Patel dropped the scope. The camera feed cut to static, then to a single frame burned into the sensor. 30 pale children standing in a basement I recognized, faces blurred except for their mouths, all smiling the same impossible width. She prescribed antipsychotics and a psych consult. I filled neither. Instead, I started researching. I wish I hadn't. It took me 3 weeks of sleepless digging in university libraries, occult forums that requiring invites written in blood, not metaphorically, and one very illegal trip to the closed stacks of the Seattle Public Library's esoteric annex. What I found will not fit in one lifetime, but here is the spine of it. The hollow choir is old, older than the land the house sits on, older than the Duwamish who avoided that bend of the river because the water there drinks voices. In 1892, a traveling preacher named Malachi Crow built a mission on Lybrook Road. He believed children were born with sin lodged in their throats like pearls of pitch. His cure was simple: remove the sin by removing the ability to lie, to cry out, to say no. He starved 30 orphans for 9 days, then fed them pages from a book no one has ever found a complete copy of, a book bound in something softer than calfskin. The children swallowed until their bellies distended. On the 10th day, he cut their tongues out and buried the tongues in the basement dirt in the shape of a perfect circle. Then he waited. At midnight, the tongues began to sing without mouths. The children, now mute, joined in perfect harmony, their voices coming from the buried meat. Crow wept. He called it a miracle. He locked the children in the cellar with the singing tongues and nailed the door shut. 3 days later, the mission burned down. Only the foundation and the cellar survived. Every house built on that foundation since has had incidents: missing children, parents waking to find their kids standing at the foot of the bed, mouths open impossibly wide, no sound coming out. realtors who list the property and then vanish. And always, always, the tapes. Because the choir learned something the night crow cut out their tongues. They didn't need bodies anymore. They just needed recordings. Every terrified cry, every bedtime prayer, every scream muffled by a parental hand, every lullaby sung to a child who would never wake up, those sounds are food. But they prefer one flavor above all. The sound of a child realizing for the first time that the world will let him die. That specific note, that exact frequency of betrayal, is what lets them grow. And apparently, 30 years ago, a little boy named Elias Marrow produced a perfect vintage. I was their first bottle. The house kept me alive on purpose. The car crash that killed my parents, the one I survived without a scratch. Not an accident, a harvest. They needed me older, old enough to understand what I'd done, old enough to finish the song willingly. Because the choir is almost complete. They have 30 voices. They need the 31st. The conductor. Me. I'm writing this on a legal pad in a Greyhound station in Spokane because every electronic device I touch now starts recording without my permission. The last phone I owned uploaded a 6-hour file titled Elias Age 34 Track 17 Acceptance Beginning to an account I don't have. I haven't listened to it yet. I'm afraid of what I'll hear myself say. 3 nights ago, I dreamed I was back in the basement. The false wall was gone. The shelves of tapes stretched into...
I reached Liebrook Road at 11:07 p.m. on All Saints' Day. The chain across the driveway had been cut. The links lay on the ground like shed teeth. My headlights caught the house, and it looked expectant. Every boarded window had a thin seam of orange light glowing between the planks, pulsing gently, like lungs breathing behind ribs. I killed the engine. The rain stopped the instant I did. Not tapered off, stopped, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I left everything in the car except 3 items. The Nagra recorder, loaded with fresh tape. A bone-handled straight razor my grandfather carried in the Pacific Theater. He swore it had tasted Japanese officers and island spirits alike. A quart mason jar filled with kerosene and a strip of cloth. I told myself the jar was for burning the tapes. I lied. The front door was open now, a perfect black rectangle, no dust on the threshold anymore. The floor inside gleamed wet, as though someone had mopped it with tongues. I crossed the threshold for the 2nd time in my life. The door shut behind me on its own, gently, politely. The deadbolt turned with a soft, satisfied click. The house spoke with my mother's voice, warm and proud. "Welcome home, baby. Everyone's waiting downstairs." I didn't answer. I was done pretending I had control. The hallway had changed. The walls were no longer walls. They were mouths, hundreds of them, child-sized, lips pale and bloodless, pressed flat into the drywall like fossils. Every mouth was moving, whispering the same phrase in perfect synchronization. Conductor, conductor, conductor. The floor beneath my boots was warm, pulsating. When I looked down, I saw why. The concentric circles carved into the hardwood had filled with dark fluid. Blood, maybe, or something thicker. The circles were rotating slowly, carrying the liquid in lazy spirals toward the basement door. The door was gone. In its place, a throat. Raw pine had been peeled back like skin, revealing wet red timber and knots that looked exactly like screaming faces.
A staircase descended straight down, deeper than the foundation should allow. The steps were slick cartilage, glistening. Each one flexed when I put weight on it, as though the house was swallowing me one bite at a time. I counted 66 steps before the light from upstairs disappeared completely. The basement had become a cathedral. The ceiling was gone. In its place, darkness so total it had texture. You could feel it pressing on your eyeballs. The floor stretched out impossibly wide. Acres, not a basement. Rows of metal shelving rose like organ pipes, each one holding thousands of reel-to-reel tapes that glowed faintly, the color of old bruises. And in the center, the choir. 30 children stood in a perfect circle, barefoot on the concrete. They wore the clothes they died in, some from the 1890s, some from the 1970s, one still in footy pajamas printed with tiny rockets. Their faces were wrong, too smooth. No eyes, no noses, just soft blank skin where features should be. Only their mouths remained, stretched impossibly wide, ear to ear, lips peeled back to reveal gums and nothing behind. No tongue, no throat, just black tunnels that went down forever. They were singing, not with air, with memory. Every note was a stolen moment, a child's first word, a last breath, a scream cut short by water or pillow or parental hands. The sound didn't travel through the air. It bloomed directly inside my skull, wet and intimate, like someone pouring honey into my brain. My knees hit the floor. The singing stopped. 30 lipless mouths smiled in perfect unison. The child closest to me, a girl maybe 8, wearing a confirmation dress yellowed with age, tilted her head. A voice came out of the black tunnel of her mouth. My voice, age 6. "You're late, Elias." I tried to speak, my throat filled with the taste of pennies and milk. The circle parted. In the middle stood a reel-to-reel deck the size of a coffin, plated in tarnished brass. It was running. 2 10-inch reels spun slowly. The tape itself was translucent, and inside I could see things moving. Tiny limbs, faces pressed against the membrane, like fetuses in plastic wombs. A single chair waited in front of the machine. My childhood chair, the one with the cracked vinyl astronauts on the seat. Someone had restrung it with copper wire and what looked like human tendons. The deck's VU meters jumped to life, all red. A microphone descended from the darkness above, vintage RCA 77DX, ribbon torn and fluttering like a dying moth. It stopped an inch from my lips. The children began to hum, a low, greedy drone. I understood then perfectly. They didn't want my death. They wanted my consent. One perfect, endless note of betrayal, sung by the man who survived them, the 31st voice, the conductor. Once I gave it willingly, the choir would be complete. They could leave the house, spread. Every speaker, every headphone, every child asleep with a phone under their pillow would become a new chapel. I would be the gospel. The girl stepped closer, her mouth opened wider than physics allowed, revealing rows of milk teeth that hadn't been there a second ago. She placed something in my lap, a reel of tape, small, 5-inch, the kind my father used for home recordings. Label in red wax crayon, my handwriting, age 5. Daddy's goodbye song, do not play until Mommy is asleep. My hands moved on their own, threaded the tape, hit play. My father's voice filled the cathedral, drunk, loving, terrible. Hey, little man, Daddy's got to go away for a while. Grown-up stuff. But I recorded this for you, okay? So you remember how much I love you. Then singing, off-key, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Halfway through, a wet thud, the sound of a body hitting tile. My mother screaming. Then silence. Then my own voice, age 4, tiny and broken. Daddy, Daddy, please wake up. The memory detonated inside me. I remembered everything. The house didn't kill my parents. I did. I was sleepwalking. I found Daddy's gun in the nightstand. I thought it was a toy. I brought it to the bathroom where he was vomiting pills and whiskey. I pointed it at his head and pulled the trigger because I wanted him to stop making Mommy cry. The second shot was for Mommy when she tried to take the gun. I was too small for the recoil to knock me over. I stood there until the police came. Then the house spoke into my ear with the voice of every dead child who ever needed a friend. Shh, we'll hide you. Just sing with us. Sing, and it never happened. And I sang for hours, days. They recorded every note while the authorities searched for the intruder. Then they let me wake up in the ambulance with no memory, covered in someone else's blood that never tested as human. The perfect vintage. The girl stroked my cheek with fingers that weren't fingers. Time for the final track, conductor. The microphone brushed my lower lip. All I had to do was open my mouth. One note, one perfect willing note, and I would never be alone again. I looked at the children, really looked. Behind the blank faces, something flickered, terror older than language. They weren't demons, they were prisoners, 30 eternal batteries, keeping the house alive, begging me to become the final lock. I made my choice. I smiled and bit down on the razor blade I'd hidden between my gum and cheek since Port Angeles. Blood flooded my mouth, hot, metallic, mine. I leaned into the microphone and sang, not their melody, mine, the sound a child makes when he realizes the monsters were trying to save.
You didn't kill us, Elias. You just set the table. I burned the house to the ground 3 nights after I walked out. I waited until the moon was new, soaked every wall in kerosene, and lit it from the basement up. The flames were silent. No crackle, no roar. Just a soft blue glow, like pilot lights in hell. When the roof collapsed, 30 pale faces looked up at me from the fire, smiling with mouths that were no longer there. I watched until there was nothing left but ash and the smell of burnt tape. Then I drove west until the ocean stopped me. For 2 weeks I slept in my truck on the Long Beach Peninsula, windows cracked, gulls screaming overhead. I told myself the worst was over. The nightmares would fade. The taste of copper would leave my tongue. They didn't. On the 15th morning, I woke up choking. My mouth was full of something soft and moving. I spat it into my palm. A strip of magnetic tape, 2 inches long, slick with blood and saliva. Printed on it in my own handwriting that I had never written. Elias, age 34, track 19, first new mouth. I tried to throw it into the surf. My hand wouldn't open. Instead, I watched, paralyzed as my fingers carried the tape back to my lips and fed it to me like communion. I swallowed. It went down warm. That night I dreamed I was standing in a kindergarten classroom I had never seen before. 23 children sat cross-legged on alphabet rugs, staring up at me with absolute trust. Their teacher was gone. I was reading them a story. My voice sounded beautiful, gentle, the kind of voice every child wants to fall asleep to. The story was about a house where lost children were never lonely. At the end of the story, every child opened their mouth and a ribbon of black tape unspooled from their throats, fluttering like party streamers. They were smiling. They were grateful. I woke up on the floor of my truck with the engine running and the driver's side door open. Sand everywhere. My boots were wet. The tide was out farther than I had ever seen it. On the dash, written in the condensation with a child's finger, "Thank you for story time, Mr. Elias. See you tomorrow night." I drove inland like the devil was behind me. He wasn't. He was already in the passenger seat. I started noticing the gaps, hours missing, sunsets I didn't remember, gas station receipts for towns I had no memory of entering. Once I found a Polaroid tucked under the wipers. Me, asleep in the truck, mouth open impossibly wide, and 30 pale children standing outside the windows, pressing their faces against the glass, leaving no reflection. Their mouths were moving in perfect unison. They were singing me to sleep. The first confirmed victim was a 6-year-old girl in Kilimack, Oregon. Her parents awoke to find her sitting at the breakfast table, eyes open, a serene smile. She had bitten off her own tongue sometime during the night. On the kitchen wall, written in blood and Crayola marker, "Shh, the choir is recording." The police found a reel-to-reel tape in her bedroom. The label was in my handwriting. They played it. 47 seconds of pure silence, followed by a single child's voice, my voice at age 6. "Good night, Daddy. Good night, Mommy. Close your eyes. We're almost ready for the next verse." Both parents were found hanged in the garage the next morning. The tape erased itself while the medical examiner watched. That was the first. There were 17 more in the next 6 weeks. Always children, always the same reel-to-reel left behind, always my handwriting, always my childhood voice. The internet exploded. Hashtags, conspiracy threads, the tape killer. Grainy CCTV of a tall man in a dark jacket filling up at gas stations hundreds of miles apart on the same night. My face, blurred just enough to be unmistakable. I became the most wanted man in America without ever leaving my truck. I tried to kill myself 3 times. First time, I put the .38 in my mouth and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. I had never loaded it. Second time, I drove the truck off the Yaquina Head cliff at 90 miles per hour. I woke up parked safely at the lighthouse overlook, with a new reel on the seat. Elias,
age 34, track 27, suicide attempt number 2, failed, obviously. Third time, I swallowed an entire bottle of Ambien with a fifth of Jack. I woke up 12 hours later in a children's hospital in Boise, harmonica in my hand, lips crusted with someone else's blood. A nurse found me crying in the lobby at 3 a.m. She said I kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm trying to stop." They sedated me. When I woke, restraints on my wrists, every TV in the ward was playing the same cartoon, only the characters had no mouths, and the laugh track was 30 children singing in perfect wordless harmony. I tore the IV out and ran. That was the night I finally understood what I had become. Not the conductor, the new house. The choir had no need for Liebrook Road anymore. They had 31 mouths now, 30 borrowed from the ash, and one that walked on 2 legs, drove a pickup truck, and bled when it tried to scream. Me. I was their mobile chapel. Every night when I lost consciousness, they took the wheel. They drove me to places where children were vulnerable, lonely, hurting. They used my voice to sing them into the choir, and every morning I woke up a little emptier, a little quieter, with another reel of tape in my pocket, and another family destroyed. I was becoming what Reverend Crow had dreamed of all those years ago. The perfect instrument, willing, portable, eternal. I tried to cut the choir out of me. In a motel bathtub in Winnemucca, I took the bone-handled razor and opened my chest from sternum to navel. I saw them. Inside my rib cage, instead of lungs, 30 pale children sat in a circle, holding hands. Their mouths were sewn shut with magnetic tape. They looked up at me with eyes that finally had pupils again, eyes full of ancient, unbearable pity. The girl from the basement, the one in the confirmation dress, stood up. She pressed a finger to her lips. Shh. Then she reached out and gently pushed my sternum closed. The skin sealed without a scar. The razor fell from my numb fingers. She kissed my forehead with lips that left a perfect circle of ash, and whispered inside my skull, in my own adult voice, "Stop fighting, Elias. You're almost empty enough to be beautiful." That night, I dreamed the final dream. I was standing in an endless dark field under a sky with no stars.